Tampa Bay is an amazing place. If you look around the bay, we have beaches, we have marshes, we have parks, we have a lot of recreational opportunities, or even if you just want to stare at the bay, it's an amazing asset. Keeping that water clean and healthy, have fish, and you would have seagrass in there, those are all important things that make the bay beautiful. But living so close to the bay also means we're constantly imposing pressures and threats on it, because as human beings, it's impossible for us to not have an impact. But what we can do is to reduce that impact to a minimum and also think about what we can do to offset those impacts.
It's so productive that we have large fisheries. We have shrimp fisheries, we have bottom fisheries right within Tampa Bay. This is an area that attracts manatees, so marine mammals, things that you don't normally see from the surface. It's not just birds. You have fish, you have turtles, you have marine mammals all living within this area, and you have a lot of people. And so that's something that we cannot ignore, is that balance between how we use the water that goes into the estuary, Tampa Bay, and how other organisms use this area, because we depend on those organisms. If we're not careful about these, we completely upset the system and we end up hurting ourselves.
So how can we do all the things that we like in terms of what gives us a good quality of life? Living close to the water, having a thriving economy, having jobs, to also not destroy the very thing that attracted us in the first place. So that's what sustainability is about, is balancing our needs without trashing it, the environment, and destroying our future generations' ability to provide for themselves, to meet their own needs. So that's the delicate balance we need to have.
So how can we be more efficient in collecting samples and understand the quality of the water in Tampa Bay much more rapidly, frequently, and over long periods of time? See how things are changing. Do they change seasonally? Do they change between day and night? Are there things that change over 5-year periods, over 10-year periods, or 20-year periods? The best way to do this quickly is to take a picture from space with a satellite. So one of the things that we do is we collect the satellite data. We collect data from boats. From boats is really the only way that you can make measurements below the water, or from buoys, things like that, that actually put instruments, allow you to make measurements below the surface, because satellites effectively really just measure a very shallow part of the ocean. So you have to make the short-term measurements at the weekly basis or shorter to understand the long term, because there's a lot of change on a day-to-day basis, on a weekly basis, just because of tides and winds and things like that. But also there's long-term change, because we know that there's changes, long-term changes in sea level, for example, or in temperature, in long-term changes in the wind that do affect the quality of the water. And there's people, because we know that we have shifting patterns of the way how we use the land, shifting agriculture patterns, shifting patterns of development, and there's more people all the time around this space. We build bridges, and so all of these things change the flow within the estuary, and that changes how productivity within the estuary is distributed. So what we want to understand is how those things change as we build, as we unbuild, and how life itself arranges itself around the bay, and how nature interacts with us, so wind, tides, temperature.
Tampa Bay has an unusual history. It's spring-fed. Its geologic environment is significantly different than other estuarine systems around the country. Well, the Earth didn't arrive yesterday. We were here in the Tampa Bay area. Tampa Bay, the estuary, didn't arrive yesterday. It has a history. And by studying the geologic components or a variety of techniques, we can understand when Tampa Bay formed, we can understand when Florida formed, we can understand when North America formed, we can understand when the Earth formed, and when the atmosphere formed, and how the ocean was created. And so all of these things, if we understand how they've behaved in the past and what extremes may have occurred in the past, we can perhaps allow us to predict what might happen in the future. Florida is blessed to have a very transmissive aquifer system. It can store the water, and the water can flow through it very quickly. Now that's a double-edged sword. Water can flow through it very quickly, and so you can pollute it very quickly.
Tampa Bay is a great success story in terms of how a water body that was on the brink of death was brought back to life and also actually thriving today. And it wasn't always easy. It was done through a lot of hard work. It was done through people in all different levels, the governmental agencies, working with citizens, working with engineers, scientists, different stakeholders around the bay, deciding that what they want to do is to make the bay better. And part of that is investing in infrastructure needed to keep the water clean.
When I was on the county commission, I was appointed to the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council. And in that role, I saw a need for bringing together the environmental groups and regulatory groups to deal with bay issues. So I suggested that we form an agency on bay management, and that exists today. It was very helpful because it would put in one room elected officials, regulators, interested citizens, and together would come up with spotting what problems were out there as well as solutions. And so it became a very powerful force.
Today, Tampa Bay is a beautiful, thriving, healthy ecosystem that's a major part of the economy here in Tampa Bay. And our communities rely on Tampa Bay for tourism, for fisheries, and it's just the heart of Tampa Bay. That's what makes it what it is. There was a time back in the 60s, 70s when the bay was not like that. The bay was very polluted. It has significant eutrophication, which is harmful algal blooms. And you can imagine that when you have so much algae growing, they also block the sunlight from reaching the seagrass that's on the bottom of the bay. And so the seagrass couldn't grow. And the reason you need the seagrass is that they provide critical habitat for some of the bottom fauna, like the shellfish, to grow. So in fact, the seagrass is considered a major ecological indicator for the bay, for the health of the bay.
And if you look now around the bay, you'll see mangroves. And see, they were going down, and that was terrible because mangroves are critical to the health of the bay. But we've been able to purchase those through the Environmental Land Program.
So what was causing all of that harmful algal bloom? A big reason for that is nitrogen loading.
And then with the Agency on Bay Management, we had industry on it. And one of the big polluters of the bay was nitrogen. Once industry became aware that they were creating a problem, they would step up and help out.
We've been on a very aggressive campaign over the decades to limit the amount of nitrogen that gets into the bay. And I can say that Tampa Bay is a success story that other communities can look at, because over the past 3-4 decades, we've essentially cut the amount of nitrogen that gets in the bay in half.
We did have some problems with the shrimpers. There were food shrimpers, a fleet that would routinely net for food shrimp in the bay. And we talked about that and found that not only were those nets scraping the bottom and taking up seagrasses, but they were also capturing a lot of small trout, redfish, snook, a lot of the fish. So we took a position that there should be no longer any food shrimping in the bay. And we were able to get that to occur. And I still serve on the Agency on Bay Management I'm there as a recreational angler, but within the past several years, the shrimpers have come back and asked if they could come back. And we voted unanimously, no, you cannot come back.
If we can detect the cause of the change in the color, then we can say something about whether we can manage it or not. We can only manage people. We cannot manage nature, but we can manage what people do. And so if it's something that is going to impact the resources that we depend on, we can try to work with the problem. We can try to fix it.
We have to protect the environment for us. We're kind of the worst polluters that the Earth has ever seen, and as a result, we can pollute the Earth to the point where we can't live here anymore. So we have to be very conscious of that, and so we have to recycle. We have to do wise things. We can't use the ocean as a dump site, and we have to protect the ecosystems that are around us as best we possibly can. Then as humans, we're different than the other life forms in the fact that I think, we appreciate beauty. And so we're capable of abstract thinking, and part of that abstract thinking involves appreciation for what's beautiful, what's wonderful. We can appreciate Tampa Bay from both aspects, from one that, yes, it's part of our community, we have to protect it for our own and for the ecosystem's well-being, plus it's just fundamentally a beautiful place, and we have to maintain it as a beautiful place.
Becoming informed is probably the best thing you can do, right? And then you can think about, are we doing enough? Are we doing not enough? And what are the things we can do to make it better?
The health of our community is dependent upon us working together. The air, the water, and all of it. We're such a fragile environment in Florida, really fragile. Our drinking water, these sinkholes. We live in a very unique place, and it's critical that we be very cautious about how we deal with life in general. How we use the environment, whether it be drinking water or wading in the bay or what we discard in the garbage. It's constant vigilance.
I think the first part is recognize that we have some contribution, and then we have a say in how we want our cities to evolve. You know, we have a say in how we live so that we can have less of an impact. So that drop of water that just hit the ground, it starts this long journey into Tampa Bay. And what we do with that drop of water on its way to the bay, we have choices into how we manage that drop of water as it works its way towards the bay.